Hey everybody, Rosematter here, and welcome to part 2 of my Umineko Let's Play. So first of all, I want to thank you guys so much for your incredibly positive reception to part 1. I knew people were looking forward to this Let's Play, but I never would have expected it to be so popular, so thank you guys so much. And also, I do have Umineko project working, so yay for that. Thank you to iCognito and Cunning Linguist for your help with that. So we are going to continue on. So, the last we left off, we were just getting to Rokkenjima Island, and we have yet to meet this big brother. I think he and his wife are the last of the siblings that we need to meet, and then I imagine that, you know, we're going to get more of that family dynamics that I'm really enjoying watching. So, let's continue on and let's see what happens next. The boat gave a big shudder. Seems we've docked at the harbor. The boat driver came out and jumped to the pier with a mooring rope. A large man in a tuxedo was waiting there for us, with a warm, smiling face. I didn't know him, but judging by his clothes, I guessed he was a servant of the Ushiromiya head house.
お嬢様、お帰りなさいませ。だいぶ遅かったので心配しておりました。
心配ありがとう。バトラのやつが怖がっちゃってよ。それで徐行運転だったってわけ。マジでうぜえぜ。
うるせえ。いつか逆の立場になったら覚えてろ。
At this rate, the word will spread around the entire family, and I'll become the big conversation piece during dinner. Even without this, everyone would be talking about me because of that 6-year gap, but now I've provided them with an even juicier topic. Damn it, why did the Ushiromiya main family have to live on this isolated island? In the meantime, the boat had finished its mooring. A small plank was lowered so we could get down. One by one, our parents came out of the boat.
皆様、長旅お疲れ様でした。奥様、お手をどうぞ。
ありがとう。お久しぶりね。ゴーダさんもお元気？
ありがとうございます。おかげさまで。毎日元気にお勤めをさせていただいております。
バトラ君はゴーダさんとは初対面じゃない？確か6年前はお勤めじゃなかったですよね。
はい。ですので、バトラ様とは初めてご挨拶させていただきます。はじめまして、バトラ様。
俺もタッパには多少の自信があったんだが、でっけえ人だな。紛れもなく初対面だぜ。こんな大男あったら絶対忘れないさ。どうも、はじめまして。バトラっす。
お待ち申し上げておりました。一昨年から後ろ宮本家にお仕えさせていただいております使用人のゴーダと申します。どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。何かご用命がございましたらいつでもお申し付けください。
ゴーダさん、お久しぶりです。
ジョージ様、ご無沙汰をいたしております。お手をどうぞ。
あんた相変わらず大した接客のプロや。もし食に困ったらいつでもわしに声をかけるんやで。いつでも雇ったろ。
これは身に余る光栄です。どうぞお手を、秀吉様。
Goda-san then lent a hand to everyone as they disembarked, greeting them as they passed. His speech and mannerisms had the refined polish of a professional. He's very graceful, in contrast with his initially rough-looking appearance. His large size made him seem a bit scary at first, but he was much more polite than my first impression of him had led me to believe. He claimed to have served on the island for 2 years, but he had doubtless worked at a similar job somewhere before. After everybody disembarked, the mooring rope was untied, and the boat started to steer away from the harbor. It was probably returning to its home port of Nijima. The captain waved his hand in farewell. Maria conscientiously waved back.
なんだかさっきから違和感があると思ったら、海猫の声を聞いてないぜ。
I guess it makes sense, right? It's when they cry. With Higurashi, it was, well, the Higurashi, the cicadas. And now with this, I guess the they refers to the seagulls. It's like at the beginning in the main menu. In Higurashi, you hear the cicadas, and in this, you hear the seagulls. It makes sense.
Umineko? 鳥のか?
Birds, no. Birds know when you see birds leave an area, you're like, okay, shit's going down. I guess it makes sense because there's a typhoon coming. I remember that whenever we came to this island, the seagulls always welcomed us with their lively nya-nya cries. And because of that, whenever I hear the cries of the seagulls in any other place, I get the feeling I've come to a family conference. Except for the small part of the island where those of the Ushiromiya head house live, Rokkenjima has been left uncultivated, apparently transforming into a paradise for wild birds. Seemingly, some cliff face or another had become home to a huge seagull colony, so this island was always full of them. That would be terrifying for me. I'm scared of birds, and I especially hate seagulls because I've been shit on seagulls multiple times in my life, so I have a little bit of a hate on seagulls. So I would hate this. Since those seagulls didn't come to greet us, I felt a little bit lonely.
どうしたのバトラ君。
ああ、ローザおばさん。いやー、別に。海猫の声が聞こえないんで、なんか寂しいなーって。
あら、そういえばそうね。いっつも賑やかなのに、今日はさっぱりいないわね。
どうして海猫いない？
Oh, derp. Umineko. That's Japanese for seagull. I didn't even make that connect. Of course, higurashi when they cry. Umineko when they cry. Seagulls when they cry. It's a strange name for a game, but like you understand it if you've played higurashi.
海猫たちも今日はよそで集まりがあるからかな。マリアも海猫見たかったの？
見たかった。
なんだってこうもまるっきりいねえんだ。ジェシカがみんな焼き鳥にして食っちまったんかな。
物騒なこと言うんじゃねえ。マリアが勘違いするだろ。ジェシカお姉ちゃんが焼き鳥にしたしてないそんなの私がするわけねえだろ。
そうだそうだ、ジェシカが焼き鳥にしたんだ。皮につくねにレバーにネギマン、皮に
くつねりレバーにネギマン。
As I made fun of Jessica, Maria tagged along looking like she was having fun. Oh, she really knows how to join in with things. Alright then, starting today, I'll make you my #1 follower. As I smiled at her, she beamed back overjoyed, I guess happy for this little bit of solidarity.
違うよ、マリアちゃん。野鳥って天気や気圧の変化に敏感なんだそうだよ。今夜あたり天気が崩れそうだしね。末早めに引き上げてるのかもしれないね。
焼き鳥じゃない？ジェシカお姉ちゃんが焼き鳥にしたんじゃない？違う。私はそんなことしないって。ほら、バトラも嘘だったって認めろよ。
バトラ君、マリアちゃんは素直な子だから、そういう冗談でも真に受けちゃうんだよ。冗談も少し選んだ方がいいよ。
George and Okay, apparently with that I've been putting the emphasis on the wrong spot, so George Aniki gently scolded me. Hopefully that's better pronunciation. Even though I outstripped Aniki in height, he still commanded respect as my elder. No choice but to obediently apologize.
あり悪い。マリア、今のは冗談だ。海猫たちは今日は素でおとなしくしてるってさ。
バトラは嘘？ジョージお兄ちゃんは本当？
I was having fun, but you were actually just tricking me? Her pure eyes seemed to accuse me. Maybe I went a little overboard with her after all.
ああ、そうだそうだ。
So now she knows, like, Battler lies. George always tells the truth, so I wonder if that's gonna come into play later.
ジョージ兄貴が言ったのが本当だ。天気が悪いんで、今日は引き上げたんだろうよ。
If these people start to go nuts and killing each other, George could use that to his advantage.
いなくなったわけじゃないんだぜ。ね、おばさん。
そうよ。明日以降、天気が良くなったら、きっと戻ってきて、ミャーミャーと声を聞かせてくれるわ。
天気良くなって戻ってくるの待つ。明日まで待つ。天気良くなるまで待つ。
Maria's mood lightened, and she started looking forward to tomorrow, when the seagulls would come back and fill the skies. Still, George Aniki really is amazing at taking care of kids. I think I remember Aniki taking good care of me as well when I was a brat 6 years ago. Aniki might have some talent for this kind of thing.
ジョージ君は小さい子の面倒を見るのがうまいわね。保育士さんでも務められるんじゃない？
なあ、ジョージ兄さんの転職っぽいぜ。私的には社長室でビジネスってよりそっちの方が兄さんのイメージだぜ。
まさか、保育士さんは立派なお仕事だよ。単なる子供好き程度に務まる仕事じゃないね。
本当にジョージ君は謙虚ね。でもバトラ君も子供のあやし方が上手よ。さっきはほんの少しの間だけどマリアとっても楽しそうだった。これからも今みたいに遊んであげてね。冗談は選んでだけどね。
Auntie Rosa winked at me, giggling a little. A real mother, I thought to myself, who's happy that Maria looks like she's having fun. Except she seems to shut Maria down, even if she just acts a little bit like a child. She's like, hey, stop doing that.
おいローザ、それにガキどもも何やってんだ。行くぞ。
はいはい、今行きます。
The old bastard was beckoning us to hurry up. We'd better get moving. It's not like it'd be late. It's not like it'd be too late to have the same discussion after we got our luggage in our rooms.
それでは皆様、お泊まりのゲストハウスの方へご案内させていただきます。どうぞこちらへ。
Goda-san called to everyone and started leading us. Kumasawa-san... Did I say that right? Kumasawa-san brought up the rear. A serpentine, twisting path led through a dim forest. It ran a bit uphill. I'd guess the path was made twisting so the slope wouldn't be felt too much. But personally, I'd been happier if they'd been man enough to make some stairs in a straight line. No doubt they made the path twisting on purpose, to put on airs of distance and importance. Before long, we saw garden-style stone steps. Ah, now I remember how it goes from here. Go up these and... At the top of the stone steps, a beautiful guest house came into view. Its facade was lovely, of course, but even more than that, we couldn't help but have our hearts stolen away by the splendor of that beautiful rose garden that spread before it.
はあ、今年も相変わらず大したもんや。目の保養とはこのことやで。
As they reached the top of the stone steps, the people welcomed in by the rose garden voiced their appreciation, one after another.
今年は少し花に元気がないんじゃない？やっぱり夏があまり暑くなかったせいかしら。
そのせいもあるかと思います。去年の先に比べると、今年は少々見劣るのが残念です。
Even so, it was a delightful rose garden. I remember that huge amount of roses used to greet me every year, even over 6 years ago. This rose garden was the first thing that greeted the people who came to Rokkenjima. Even our parents who came every year couldn't help but let their wonder slip out. And moreover, it even looked like a powered-up version of the garden from 6 years ago that was in my memories.
いつ見てもすごいわね。自宅にこれだけのバラ園があったらさぞや素敵でしょうに。
よせよ、誰が手入れすんだよ。バラは虫とか病気とか大変なんだぜ。
そうね。キリエ姉さんは毎日バラの手入れをしてて虫がつかないようにしてるそうよ。
Okay.
そうなのかよ。そんな話は知らないぜ。
そうなんです。この人の場合はバラの方から虫を求めていっちゃうから、どっちかというとたちの悪い食虫植物ってところね。
ああ、そういう話かよ。たく。ローザ、今日はそういう話は勘弁してくれよ。もうそういうのはすっかり足を洗ったんだぜ。
どうかしら。ルドルフ兄さんは遺伝子的レベルでだらしないですし。
大丈夫よローザさん。あんまりおいたするバラなら根元からちょんって切っちゃうから。
物騒なお話ですね。
モテる男はいつもリスクと隣り合わせなんや。わしも来世じゃもうちょい美形に生まれたいもんやで。
だから秀吉兄さん、モテてなんかないって。キリエも物騒な話なんかやめろい。 俺のバラがしおれちまったじゃねえか。
ほら、マリアちゃん、来てごらん。こっちのバラは特に立派だよ。
バラが立派。
かぐわしい匂いだぜ。俺のエレガントさにぴったりだな。
おいよせよ。マリアが真似してトゲで怪我するだろ。
She yelled at me as I leaned in with an exaggerated gesture to smell the rose's scent. I thought she was overreacting, but when I turned around, I saw Maria imitating my every movement, and thereby putting a broad smile on George Eniki's face.
ほら、マリアちゃん、気をつけて。
Why do I have a feeling Maria is going to be very important in this story, especially with how, like, impressionable she is?
バラのトゲは痛いよ。
ほう、少女お兄ちゃん、このバラだけ変。
変？どうしたんだよ。
Maria pointed to a single rose. I immediately understood why she found it odd. In the midst of all these magnificent roses, just one single rose was withering. There wasn't any particular reason. Some roses flourish and others wither. That's all there was to it, but Maria seemed very concerned about there being only one unhealthy rose in a group of healthy ones. She must be feeling somehow like it's been left out.
このバラだけ元気がなくて。
ほう、他はみんな元気なのに、これだけかわいそう。
まあ咲いたり枯れたりはそれぞれだからな。一足先にしおれる代わりに、そのバラは他のどのバラよりも早く開花できたんだと思うぜ。
そうだよな。いっぱい咲いて、その役目を終えてお休みに入ったってだけのことだと思うぜ。そんなに気に病むことはねえさ。
ほう。
It seemed that Maria's pure sensitive nature was making her feel some emotional pain for the rose that withered alone. Even though she understood the logic of it, it still felt lonely to her.
じゃあマリアちゃん、帰るまでの間、このバラをお世話してあげるといいよ。
ほう。
George Aniki straightened up and felt around in his pocket. He then took out a wrapping from the candy he'd eaten on the plane. He twisted it into a thin string and gently tied it to the rose as a sort of marker.
へえ、なんだか可愛くなったね。
これがこのバラの目印だよ。後でお水とかをあげに来てごらん。バラさんもきっと喜ぶと思うよ。
お水とかあげに来る。
せっかくだからこのバラさんに何か名前をつけてあげるといいよ。そうするとバラさんも喜ぶと思うし。
名前
Though she still wore her usual sullen face, Maria crossed her arms and began to consider this intently. At the very least, she appeared to have been completely pulled out of her slump. Nice going, Aniki.
ジョージ兄さんって昔っから包容力があるよな。尊敬するぜ。
だな、人徳ってやつだろ。後で爪の赤をもらってきてやるから一緒に。
この庭園はお前が子供の頃にもこんなに立派だったんか？
私が出てってからよ、こんなに立派になったのは。前の庭園の方が素朴で愛着があったんだけどね。兄さんがちょっと悪趣味にいじりすぎたのよ。前の方がずっと良かったんだから。
エヴァ、ポジティブシンキングやで。昔は置いといて今のこの美しさをめでなあかん。その方が心が安らかになるで。
別にそんな意味じゃ。ただ私は昔の方が素敵だった庭園をあなたにも見てほしかったなってだけよ。
それでは皆様よろしいでしょうか。そろそろお部屋の方にご案内いたします。
Goda-san called to everyone to ask if we were ready, but our hearts had been completely stolen away by the rose garden after a year of absence, and we didn't lend him an ear. Since we weren't a travel group, it wasn't like we had a strict schedule to follow. Besides, for our parents, this was their fond old birth home they'd returned to, so they felt no obligation to be pressured by anyone. Understanding the situation, Goda-san continued to wait, with a wide smile, for our parents to lose interest in the roses and tell him to guide us to the rooms.
おや？おーい、カノン君やないか。久しぶりやな。元気か？
Uncle Hideyoshi suddenly shouted. In the direction he was waving, there was a slender boy. Meeting him right after a huge man like Goda probably emphasized his small stature. The boy was in the middle of transporting piled-up gardening tools and the like in a wheelbarrow. When he realized he was being called to stop, he sat down in the wheelbarrow, took off his hat, and bowed his head.
Konnichiwa.
I figured he was probably younger than me. I realized by the general atmosphere surrounding him that he was a servant too. Though he did greet Uncle Hideyoshi back, he himself seemed like he might be unsociable. It was a greeting that lacked feeling. When Goda-san noticed our interest had shifted toward him, he went to the boy's side and introduced him to us.
バトラ様、ご紹介いたします。後宮本家にお仕えしております使用人の一人です。カノンさん、お客様にご挨拶を。
はじめまして。使用人のカノンです。
Yep, my first impression wasn't wrong. He gave the feeling that he was unsociable, or maybe a bit of a poor speaker. In contrast with Goda-san, who was extraordinarily polished as a servant, it was impossible not to feel the immaturity you'd expect of someone his age. When Goda-san urged him in a whisper to give a bit more of an introduction, the boy named Kanon only cast his eyes downwards.
カノンさん、もう少し何か挨拶することはできませんか？
いえ、僕たちは家具ですから。
Oh damn. Wow, saying that right out loud, huh? It seemed he wasn't refusing to greet us out of spite, but rather he gave the impression he didn't know what else to add to his greeting, and so could do nothing other than stay silent.
カノン君は寡黙でさ、余計なおしゃべりはしない性分なんだよ。愛想は少し悪いけど、根はいい人なんだぜ。誤解しないで。ここに勤めて3年になるんだっけ？確かゴーダさんより1年長いんだよな、カノン君。
Even though it's not like he made a super bad impression, Jessica hurriedly backed him up. I see. Apparently him being unsociable works against him all the time.
そっか。よろしくな。俺はバトラ。18だけど、君はいくつだい？
A silence, as if evaluating whether it was a question that must be answered or not. But here again, Jessica plowed ahead.
確か私たちの2つ下だから16だったよな。
はい、そうです。
It looked as if given a choice, he would have preferred not to tell us his age. Him not wanting to tell us his age was probably because he thought he'd be looked down upon for it. I remembered that when I was around his age, I hated being asked how old I was by adults. I see. 16, huh? That's gotta be a delicate time. In that case, I asked something I shouldn't have. Uh-oh.
近いとして嬉しいぜ。気さくにバトラって呼んでくれよな。俺も君のことはカノンって呼ぶぜ。
ありがとうございます。お気持ちだけで結構です。バトラ様。
Jessica looked flustered for some reason. She seemed to think my impression of Kanon was worsening because of his rejection. Well, I doubt a girl like Jessica understands his fretful male heart. As his elder, even by just 2 years, who would lead him into adolescence, I took it upon myself to understand that.
カノンさん、もう少し愛想よくはできませんか？笑顔も使用人の義務ですよ。
申し訳ありません。努力します。
ゴーダさん、カノン君もいろいろ頑張ってるんですよ。
It seemed as though he was often warned about his discourtesy, and apparently he hadn't improved a bit. Goda-san kept his business smile, but let a small sigh of resignation escape.
それではまだ仕事がありますので、失礼します。
He looked like Kanon himself was uncomfortable with remaining silent here any longer. After another perfunctory bow, he turned on his heels and started pushing the wheelbarrow again. Just then, suddenly, the wheelbarrow wobbled and fell, scattering the load. I guess the wheelbarrow with its single wheel caught on a pebble and lost its balance.
何をしてるんですか？早く片付けて。
Goda-san urged him along in a low voice, as if to remind him it is a servant's shame to present a clumsy appearance in front of guests. Showing he understood quite well without being told, Kanon-kun wordlessly reloaded the wheelbarrow with the fallen objects. He seemed to be fine with the light-looking gardening tools, shovels and such, but he looked like he was having trouble getting his arms around and lifting up some sacks of fertilizer.
大丈夫かよ。そそっかしいな。ほら。
お嬢様、お召し物が汚れます。ここはお任せください。
With an elegant gesture, Goda-san took the shovel that Jessica had picked up. At his back was the figure of Kanon-kun having trouble with the sacks of fertilizer.
おお、お召 新物が汚れる？
安心しろよ。俺が着てるのはそんなお上品なものじゃねえぜ。それによ、俺はレストランで落ちたフォークをウェイトレスに拾わせるってやつが大嫌いなんだ。
I like them so far. Like, yeah, they're rich kids, but they seem to have... They think about other people, and they try and help out even though they don't have to. So far, I like these characters. I lifted up the other bags that had fallen. Of course, they weren't light, but for me it was a piece of cake. Or he's like suddenly flexing like, look how strong I am. Kanon-kun turned his surprised eyes towards me. It was the face of one who would never have expected to receive help from a guest.
バトラー様、結構です。僕が全てやりますので。
気にすんな。こう見えても鍛え方が違うぜ。
Kanon-kun looked like he hadn't yet gone through his growth spurt and was stuck with a sort of weak body. I guess this kind of weight is a bit much for him.
結構重いね。カノン君が苦労するのも無理はないよ。カノン君、気にしないで。
これぞ俺の見せ場さ。これでさっきの船の分はチャラだよな。
この程度のことじゃさっきの大騒ぎが帳消しになるもんかよ。カノン君にも後で教えてやるよ。バトラったら面白いんだぜ。
落ちる落ちる。
Banter made the job seem quick, and before I knew it, all the stuff had been piled back into the wheelbarrow.
お見苦しいところをお見せして申し訳ございませんでした。
さあもう結構ですよ。言ってください。
Letting such a disgraceful thing be seen by the guests, who were supposed to be made welcome, must have been hideously embarrassing as a servant. Pressed by Goda to hurry up and exit, Kanon-kun left.
ゴーダさんもいじめすぎよ。意地悪言わないで、あなたも手伝えばよかったんじゃない？
これは至りませんで、誠に申し訳ございませんでした。
Without even a twitch in his smile, Goda-san apologized elegantly. This guy almost seems too, like, polite. I'm immediately suspicious of him. I gotta be suspicious of someone. That's in my nature with these games.
カノン君もええところはぎょうさんあるんやで。
Plus, if there's murders that are gonna be happening, having a servant who will help people, I feel like he could do a lot of damage, like poison drinks or whatnot.
ただ若いんかの。いろいろと損をしとる。もったいないわ。
気難しい年頃さ。そっとしといてやれよ。使用人は寡黙なくらいがちょうどいいさ。な、熊沢さん。
ルドルフ様は手厳しゅうございますこと。私ほど使用人で寡黙なものはおりませんとも。
Everyone smiled wryly at that shameless lie. Even she herself didn't believe that, not in her wildest dreams. She said that to loosen us all up. Yeah, that's the kind of character Kumasama Bachan used to be. The mood that had stiffened a little was cleared up in a twinkling, thanks to that Kumasama-san's cheerful smile.
そろそろ荷物を置きたいわね。ゴダさん、部屋割りはどうなってるのかしら。
昨年と同じになっております。さあ、ご案内いたします。どうぞこちらへ。
We headed towards the trim and elegant guest house. This was going to be our temporary quarters for a night. Kanon watched overhead as the guests all entered the guest house. Then he let his eyes fall on those heavy sacks of fertilizer piled up in the wheelbarrow. In his mind, he kept going over his previous mistake. Battler, big and strong, had picked up the sacks in front of him, the sacks he couldn't lift himself, as if they were feathers. It was extremely difficult for an outside observer to guess what emotions that favor had stirred up in Kanon. But as far as you could tell by watching him hang his head from behind, there was something that he just couldn't let go. Muttered words escaped his lips, but those words he murmured were so soft that they didn't reach even his own ears.
僕だって。
Kanon hung his head, slightly biting his lower lip.
バラの庭園は記憶にあったんだけどよ。このゲストハウスっつうのは記憶にねえな。これ建てたのは最近か？
oh boy, Torian Visitor's Retreat was written on a gatepost-like thing, but since everyone called it the guesthouse, I followed their lead. The brand new Western-style guesthouse that stood overlooking the rose garden had a magnificent design carefully done in harmony with the garden.
正解だよ。建ったのはつい一昨年さ。それ以降は僕たちはこっちに泊めさせてもらってるんだよ。
年季の入ったボロ屋敷よりこっちの方が好評みてえだしな。私も自分の部屋をこっちに持ちたいぜ。
マリアも持ちたい持ちたい。
I guess you could call my house upper class as well, but I was reminded again how completely ordinary it was compared to the head house. It showed a shocking display of wealth that they would build this kind of awesome guest house for guests who come over like once a year.
エヴァ様、秀吉様、こちらのお部屋をお使いくださいませ。ルドルフ様、キリエ様はこちらのお部屋をお使いくださいませ。
やっぱりここは綺麗で上品でいいわね。洋風って本当に素敵だわ。
ほんの2、3日なら洋風もええやろが、ずっといて落ち着くのは断固和風やで。日本人は畳の上が一番くつろげるんや。
新しい家を和風にするか洋風にするかで喧嘩してね。お父さんが和風で着工させたのを母さんまだ根に持ってよく言い合いをするんだよ。
ジョージ兄さんのところは両親仲が良くて羨ましいぜ。うちなんか冷め切ったもんさ。そのくせ私の成績の話だけは連帯しやがる。
I'm interested to meet her parents, the one that everybody seems to have issue with, this scary older brother. All the rooms seemed to be two-person. I was grateful, because now I wasn't going to be forced to share the same room with the old bastard for some bullshit reason like being family. Besides, I figure those two wouldn't be able to enjoy themselves with someone like me around. Hehehe.
何気持ち悪い顔で笑ってんのよ。
Ew, it's just like, oh. When I think about that with my parents, my first thought is like, hee hee hee, like with a weird smile, I'm just like, ugh. Don't want to think about that.
どうせ下世話なこと考えてるんでしょう。
下世話なんてとんでもない。どうぞごゆっくりお過ごしくださいませ。あ、いたいたいたいた。いたよ、クソ親父。
I guess he's still, you know, like a teenager, but still, just like he's finding his kicks wherever he can, like in his cousin, thinking about his parents. Or I'm sorry, his dad and his stepmother, not his real mom, but still. Once again, Dad pulled my ears from behind.
バカなこと言ってんじゃねえ。俺は胃がキリキリ痛み始めてて、とてもそんな元気はわかねえぜ。今回はお前が主賓だろうが、せいぜい親父や兄貴たちに可愛がられるよ。親父の前では言葉遣いにだけ気をつけろ。あの人、本当にシャレが通じねえからな。ジェシカちゃん、我らが当主様のご機嫌は最近どうなんだ？
去年から相変わらずかな。余命3ヶ月余命3ヶ月って割には相変わらずピンピンカリカリイライラしてるって話です。
今年も相変わらず不機嫌ってわけね。お守りができるのはやっぱり源氏さんだけなの？
親方様も源氏さんにだけは心を許しておいでのようです。私たち下々では近頃はお目通りすらなかなか叶わず。
All the more reason I'm immediately suspicious of this servant, this guy. I know they're friends based on the intro, but I'm like, so he's the one who can get close to this old guy, the master, and then he's gonna die, I'm assuming.
また書斎に閉じこもって怪しげな黒魔術三昧じゃねえのかな。
And then, of course, there's this witch, Beatrice? Is that how you say it? I know the way he said it was very rare, like, Beatrice or something like that, but I'm like, her name is gonna be a little bit of an issue.
何をやろうとてめえの趣味だから構わねえけど、匂いが立ち込める系は勘弁してほしいもんだぜ。ついでにそのまま書斎から永久に出てくんなってんだ。
年長の人にそんな言い方をするもんじゃないよ。後宮家を復興させてくれた大恩人なんだから、もっと感謝しないと。
まあ、ごめん。
After being rebuked by George Aniki, Jessica had no choice but to take back her thoughtless remark. The Ushiromiya family was wealthy beyond belief, but that, of course, meant that all its members were eccentric people, completely at odds with the rest of society. The head of the family, standing at its peak, in other words, our grandfather, seemed to be a particularly eccentric and terrifying person, even for our family. Dad had said he was getting a stomachache earlier, but I guess that was what all the adults who came here today were actually feeling. No doubt they were jealous of us, the grandchildren, just playing and laughing without a care. From the stories Dad told me, the head of the family was a violent man who rained blows on his sons with his own fists and even beat his daughters mercilessly with a wooden sword. If he was such a staunch traditionalist with his kids, why wasn't he the same with their names? Because of that, even us grandkids had to suffer. Well, I had absolutely no trouble believing the terrifying image they paint of him. I don't have many memories of meeting him over the years, but I remember his face was full of menacing thunderclouds, always making the people around him shrink away with a sharp look. I remember that the room's atmosphere got so tense whenever he was around, you couldn't even breathe. What my dad said right now about me being the guest of honor now carries a little more oomph for me.
6年前は俺も小学生だったが、さすがに今は高校生だ。失礼のある態度なんか取ったら大変なことになるかもしれねえな。怖い怖い。
確かにこわもてだけど、そんなに硬くなるほど怖い人じゃないよ。決して理不尽なことは言ってないもん。口下手なだけでちゃんと筋は通す人だよ。
ジョージ兄さんは昔から成績優秀で一族の鏡じゃねえかよ。私たちとじゃじい様の待遇が全然違うぜ。私なんか木刀で引っ叩かれたことあるしよ。尻だぜ尻。それも乙女の生尻をよ。
ジェシカちゃんは本家の跡取り娘だもん。おじい様も特に目をかけてくれてるんだよ。その厳しさは期待の気持ちの裏返しだと思わなくちゃ。
冗談じゃねえぜ。その跡取りってやつはジョージ兄さんに譲るよ。私が担ぐにはちょいとしんどいぜ。
I think I already said it before, but Jessica's the daughter who will inherit the head house. The pressure on her shoulders must be different from us cousins of the branch families.
ほう、ジェシカお姉ちゃんが重い？マリアが持ったら軽くなる？
うんサンキューな。大丈夫。マリアちゃんには押し付けねえよ。この十字架は私が墓まで背負ってくよ。安心しなって。
While grateful for Maria's innocent consideration, it seemed that Jessica could not easily rid of herself of the anxiety for the future that remained visible on her face. I guess I'm no different. Any high schooler with exams looming ahead is bound to have an anxiety for the future they can't hide.
マリアいらっしゃい。お母さんとマリアはこの部屋よ。
バトラ君は僕と一緒にこっちの部屋だってさ。
おお、なになに、こりゃ驚いた。親たちの部屋より広めじゃないのよ。わお
どうせいとこ同士で集まるだろうと思ってよ。大きめの部屋にするように言っておいたんだ。
Oh man, this just making me think when I was a kid, and when we would go over for Christmas dinners at my granda's place, and all the cousins would be downstairs in the rec room. Oh, I miss that. It's so fun. This is a little bit more serious, I imagine, but like, it's given me a little bit of weird nostalgia for like my childhood too.
おお、マリアもこっちがいい。ママと一緒よりこっちがいい。おお。
そうか、マリアもこっちがいいか。よし、ここは俺とジョージ兄貴の部屋だが、お母さんには内緒だぞ。
内緒。
Her mother, Auntie Rosa, was right behind her, but Maria still answered, striking the air with her fist clenched tight. After our parents put the luggage in the rooms, they gathered again in the corridor.
おいガキども、お前らはどうする？ここでいとこ同士おしゃべりでもしてるか？
It seemed they were heading to the mansion to announce their arrival. Normally, we would have had to follow them and greet everyone together. But if that had been the case, Dad would have just said, "You guys come too," and been done with it. He's telling us it's alright if we don't come. So what will we do?
どうせもうすぐお昼や。子供はそこでくつろいでたらええ。それに表で遊べるのは下手をすると今のうちだけかもしれんしの。
マリアも行く。
マリアはここでお留守番してなさい。いたずらをしないでおとなしく待ってるのよ。
Now that Maria had been told to house sit, we couldn't just leave her behind. George Aniki realized that immediately and gave a clear reply for all of us.
じゃあ僕たちはお言葉に甘えて留守1年ぶりに積もる話もあるしね。
それがいいわ。バトラ君なんか6年分積もってるんだしね。
へいへい。お子ちゃまな俺はおとなしくお留守番してるぜ。
熊沢さん、私もこっちに残るからよ。あとは大人に任せて若者は退散してるぜ。
それがおよろしいでしょう。奥様にはそのようにお伝えいたします。
それでは皆様、お屋敷の方へご案内させていただきます。どうぞこちらへ。
他の子はともかく、ジョージは成人してるんだから連れて行った方がいいんじゃない？
そんなんでジョージだけ仲間外れはかわいそうやで。いとこ同士の交流も大事や。ほな、行ってくるで。
The adults left one after the other. Like the time he had guided us from the harbor, Goda-san went ahead, with Kumasawa... Oh my gosh, I have trouble with her name sometimes. Kumasawa-san at the rear. As we gathered in the cousin's room assigned to us, George Aniki asked us to excuse him for a second. He rushed over to Kumasawa-san, who was following behind the disappearing adults, and seemed to be asking her something. He soon finished his business and came back.
どうしたんだよ、兄貴。
ああ、なんでもないよ。ちょっと聞きたいことがあっただけさ。
マリアにも聞いて、マリアにも聞いて。
何かな。ジョージ兄さんが私に聞かなくて熊沢さんには聞くことってなあ、全然見当がつかねえぜ。
いや、誤解だよ。ジェシカちゃんが何を誤解してるのか知らないけど。
Aniki was getting pretty tongue-tied. It's like he had something to hide and Jessica had the dirt on him. Whatever it is, something only Jessica knows and I don't is no fun at all.
なあ、マリア。俺たちだけのけ者なんてねえよな。何の話か聞きてえよな。
バトラとマリアも聞きたい。バトラとマリアも聞きたい。
I fooled around while oohing together with Maria.
いや、だから大したことじゃ。
さっつけ。兄貴にしちゃ嘘が下手だぜ。ハーフマリア、お前は右脇をくすぐれ。俺は左脇だ。
マリアは右脇で、バトラは左脇だ。
ちょっと二人ともやめて。やめ。
George Aniki rolled around on the bed in an effort to get away, and Mario and I played around chasing him. There's something in the back of my mind telling me I'm a high schooler now and not a dim kitten, but in spite of that, I miss this kind of fun. A warm kind of fun that will probably end very soon.
ジョージ兄さんが熊沢さんに聞いたのはね、まあほらあれだぜ。兄さんも本家は1年ぶりだからよ。その間に辞めた使用人とか入った使用人とか、そういうのがいたら挨拶したいって、そういうことらしいぜ。
Oh, is there maybe a girl servant he has a crush on?
挨拶する。マリアも挨拶する。
なんだよそれ。全然やましくねえじゃねえかよ、兄貴。違うな。マリア、騙されるな。兄貴は何か隠してるぞ。尋問再開だ。おりゃ。
いや、やめてよ本当に。マリアちゃんももうやめて。
多分掃除とか昼飯の準備とかで忙しいんだよ。大丈夫。後でちゃんと挨拶に来るぜ。ゴーダの出しゃばりの出迎えよりシャノンの出迎えの方が良かったって言うんだろ。
シャノン？シャノン。あ、思い出したぜ。そんな子もいたな。今も使用人やってんのか？元気かよ。
そういや、夏日姉さん。
Okay, so this is the mother of Jessica.
最近頭痛の方はどうなんや。一時だいぶしんどそうにしとったろ。
おかげで最近はだいぶ調子が
What
いい
is
で
it with
す。
the girls in this? Like, Ava's is relatively normal, but man, the girls have some weird hair. The ladies of this family.
心配をしてくれてありがとう。
Kyrie's is normal as well. It's short, but it's normal.
そうだ、これ。夏日姉さんにお土産。
いつもありがとう。あなたには何かをもらってばかりね。これは紅茶。
ペパーミントとレモンバームのハーブティー。頭痛によく効くって有名なお店のブレンドなの。姉さんにも効くかなって思って。
Rosa was always a conscientious woman. Probably because she was the youngest of four, and by quite some distance. She managed to grow up without harboring the venomosity of her siblings. Her consideration made Natsui soften her expression for just a moment. But it wasn't enough to undo the many years of anxiety that had curdled her expression, one of bland indifference.
そういえばあなた、いっつも頭痛だって言ってたわね。しっかりなさいな。ジェシカちゃん、今年は受験でしょ？人生の節目じゃない。母親のあなたがそんなじゃ頼りないわよ。それに夏日姉さん、私より3つも若いんだから、もうちょっとしっかりなさい。ごめんなさい。生まれつきの頭痛持ちなもので。
Ava sometimes fails to choose her words carefully, but even though she hid it with a smile, her comments aimed at Natsui contained shards of obvious malice. Of course, that didn't escape Natsui. She frantically contained her urge to grimace and pretended to ignore Ava.
うちのバトラ君も今年は受験でしょ。ルドルフさんも少しは関心を持ったら、自分の息子のために夏日姉さんみたいに頭痛になるくらい真剣になりなさいよ。
俺が何か言えば必ず反抗するやつだぜ。じゃあなんて言うんだ。むしろ逆で遊んでていいぞっていうのか。あいつそういうのだけは素直に聞きやがるぜ。秀吉兄さんのところは受験本当にうまくいったじゃないですか。ぜひ子供操縦術の秘訣を教えてくださいよ。
そうやな。何のために勉強するのかっちゅうことを説いたかもしれんな。個々の勉強に意味があるわけやないんや。そう、勉強っちゅうのはわからんことを自分で調べて身につけるという行為の練習なんや。これができんやつは社会に出ても使い物にならん。国語算数ができろと言ってるんやない。勉強し身につけることを学べっちゅうことやな。
ご立派ですわ。うちのジェシカにもそれが理解できればいいんだけど、今のままではとてもじゃないけど、後宮家の跡取りとしては。いいじゃないの、無理に跡取りにしなくても。女には女の幸せというものもあるんだし、それを親が押し付けちゃ悪いわよ。
予算買えば子供の育て方は家それぞれや。押し付けがましいのはあかんで。
ごめんなさい。夏日姉さんも気を悪くしないでね。
Though the light shining in through the window was quite warm despite the cloudy weather, there was a dark mood about the room, which probably caused headaches for other people besides Natsui. I want to go back to the kids. They're definitely more lighthearted. As if to brush away that mood, Kyrie brightly made a suggestion to all present.
でも本当に素敵な香りの紅茶ね。早速いただいてみましょうよ。レオポルドの紅茶なんて日本じゃ確か銀座でしか買えなかったはずよ。
キリエ姉さんはお詳しいですね。買ってきた甲斐がありました。
Kyrie and Rosa stood up from their seats and made as if to prepare the black tea. Natsui forestalled them.
お二人ともありがとう。それは後でいただきましょう。うちの者がすぐお茶を持ってきますので、どうぞおくつろぎください。
二人とも後にしろよ。ウェルカムドリンクくらいごちそうになろうぜ。
Rudolph gave a subtle signal with his eyes for them to sit down again. Kyrie and Rosa understood instantly and obediently returned to their seats. The guests had been greeted, so it was time for some tea to be prepared for them. That tea was late, and having the guests talk about making some themselves was an embarrassment for the host. Not-so-rosy bit her lower lip, frustrated with the ineptitude of the servants who were taking too long to bring the tea. Seeing her face, Ava, without hesitation, started to giggle. Of course, Shannon had no way of knowing what was taking place in the parlor, as she came in pushing a dish cart piled with teacups. Not-so-rosy gave her a pained look for no apparent reason, and Shannon couldn't help but flinch without knowing what she had done wrong.
失礼いたします。お茶のご用意をさせていただきます。
おう、シャノンちゃん、久しぶりやの。ますますべっぴんさんになりよったな。
いえ、どうも。
おしゃべりは配膳を済ませてからになさい。お茶が冷めます。
申し訳ございません、奥様。
She apologized like a small frightened animal, and bumping against the serving cart, made a jarring racket as she dropped several teaspoons. Her clumsiness made Not-so-rosy's expression even harsher, which made Shannon in turn quail even more.
いいのよ、夏日姉さん。挨拶の一つくらいしたってどうってことないわよ。もう十分待たされてる分、十分お茶も冷めてるもの。
I feel like Ava's gonna get killed. She's gonna push the wrong buttons and she's gonna end up dead.
それは大丈夫です。冷めてはおりませんので。
シャノン、早く配膳を済ませなさい。
失礼しました。
It was obvious that Not-so-rosy was getting irritated. The ineptitude that delayed the tea, the clumsiness of the servant, everything pointed to the incompetence of Not-so-rosy's everyday guidance, making her lose face. As the person in charge of matters in the Ushiromiya head house, allowing that clumsiness to be exposed today of all days was surely nothing less than total humiliation.
よせよ、夏日姉さん。シャノンちゃんだって頑張ってるのに、いじめちゃかわいそうだぜ。
いじめてなんかいません。
いい香りね。お茶の銘柄を聞いてもいいかしら。
申し訳ございません。後ほど調べてまいります。
Kyrie had tried to be nice to her, wanting to cut through the tense mood, except now it's going to be worse because Natsui's going to be like, you can't even tell them simple information, you are a failure. However, instead, Shannon had shown a disgraceful display, darkening Natsui's face and the room's mood. By this point, Ava's giggles were loud enough to be heard by everyone in the room.
なーに？シャノンちゃん、自分で入れてるものが何かもわからないの？ダメよ。そんな怪しげなものを来客に振る舞っちゃ。
Alright, I'm starting to like Ava a little bit less. At first it seemed like just, fun poking at her siblings, but just this very passive-aggressive teasing of people is, yeah, it's like I'd be annoyed being around her too.
こんなお茶じゃ、銀のスプーンでもないと飲めないわよ。
すみません。すぐに用意を。
ねえ、シャノンちゃん、銀のスプーンって何に使うか知ってる？
Is it to test for poison?
銀じゃないとダメなのよ。なぜかわかる？
いえ、
Ava's eyes played over Shannon, who was setting the table as a catty smile floated onto her face. Taken on its own, the expression on Ava's face may have been charming in an impish sort of way. However, the words being spun from her lips held within them the keenness of a razor. The voice actress definitely tends to play these certain characters, don't they? It looks like she was Takano, and now Ava just has this definite sharpness to her. Shannon tried with all her might to avoid Ava's gaze, which continued to focus on her. Grasping that Shannon was hard-pressed for an answer, Rosa promptly gave some timely help.
銀は毒に触れると曇るって言われてるの。
Hey, I'd be good for a servant to that aspect, in that I know what a silver spoon's purpose is. Will this come back later, this whole talk about poisoning?
シャノンちゃんも一つお勉強ができたわね。
The tea was being treated as undrinkable unless it could first be tested for poison. In Natsui's eyes, this was an insult to both the tea and herself for serving it. Rudolph, laughing flippantly, patted Ava's shoulder.
姉貴に銀食器なんていらねえだろ。毒舌の姉貴が一舐めしたら、銀の皿だって真っ黒に曇っちまうぜ。
わしはその毒舌を毎日聞かされとるから、もう毒に耐性がついてしもたわ。エヴァもわし相手には構わんが、 体勢のない相手にはちいと加減せんとな。
あらあら、ひどい。シャノンちゃんにお茶の知識を教えてあげただけじゃない。
Everyone followed the lead set by Hideyoshi's horse laugh and smiled, though sourly. There remained a single exception to this in Natsui, but even so, for the time being, the conversation inside the parlor could now be mistaken for a lively and friendly chat. As Shannon finally finished setting the tea table and made to leave, Kyrie apologized to her in a low voice for not being able to help. Shannon gave a light bow and made a hasty retreat. Shannon cast her eyes downward, pushing the cart down the corridor. The pitiful air around her made it obvious she had borne the brunt of some bullying.
気を落とさないで。姉さんは何も悪くない。
見てたのね。
そういうお役目だから。奥様もエヴァ様も地獄へ落ちろ。でも、それより卑劣なのはあいつだ。
Kanon glared hurtfully in the opposite direction of the parlor. Ooh, I wonder who the coward is. Which guy is he talking about? Rudolph? Is he talking about this brother that is yet to be introduced? Is he talking about the Gonza, I think is his name? Obviously there's some animosity between the servants and some of these people. The preparations for the tea had been delayed by a bit of trouble in the kitchen. That trouble had not been Shannon's fault. Oh, this is who he's talking about. The truth is, it had been Goda's mistake. In the first place, there was no way that a show-off like Goda would ever hand over a flamboyant job like catering the tea to the guests. Or carting, sorry. He had needed to make the tea all over again, which had made him late. So realizing he wouldn't be earning any brownie points, he pushed the task of setting the table on Shannon, who happened to be passing by. Oh, I knew there was a little bit of darkness to this guy. He's like perfectly pleasant and polite to the people that he needs to impress, but then, yeah, he obviously is looking down on the other servants and trying to get them in trouble. One could truthfully call it being shrewd, and one could unquestionably call it cowardice.
いいの。ありがとう、カノン君。私、全然気にしていないし。
Kanon's silence vividly showed that Shannon's words weren't coming from her heart.
ありがとう。カノン君だけでも分かってくれたんで、ちょっと心が楽になったかな。
姉さんは心にいろいろ溜め込みすぎる。たまには自分に優しくしてあげて。
うん。ありがとうね。
Suddenly, they both felt someone's presence and whirled around. An elderly man stood there. It was Genji, the head servant.
そこで何をしている？シャノン。早く厨房に戻りなさい。
あ、はい。失礼いたしました。
Uh-oh. Shannon humbly obeyed and promptly made to push the cart and leave. However, Kanon appealed to Genji in silence, bearing something in his eyes that he could not express in words.
どうした？何かあったか？
シャノンは何も悪くないのに、あいつら。
やめて、カノン君。失礼しました。すぐに仕事に戻ります。カノン君も自分の持ち場に戻って。お願い。
姉さんがそう言うなら。
何事もないなら、そうしなさい。
はい、失礼します。
Oh, from the shadows in the hallway, an old woman wearing an apron watched over them. It was Kumasawa.
おいたわしや。シャノンさん、カノンさん。あの二人がいじめられる理由は何もないのです。しかし、ゴーダさんに嫌われているのは紛れもない事実。ゴーダさんは、後宮本家へいらっしゃられるまで、どこかの立派なホテルにお勤めだったそうです。そこで身につけられたというお仕事ぶりは、そりゃ大したものだとは思います。ただ、ゴーダさんはここでは最も年季の短い使用人。ご自身のそれまでの積み重ねによるプライドもあられたのでしょう。彼は自分より長い年季を持ちながらも、未熟で人生経験も及ばないシャノンさんとカノン君をことあるごとにいびられるのです。また、 気の毒なことに夏日奥様にも嫌われております。もちろん年季という意味では奥様の方が長くこの家におられます。ただこればかりは奥様にも同情しなくてはなりません。本当に親方様も罪作りな方でございます。ご自身のちょっとした気まぐれが奥様にこれほどまでの劣等感をお与えになるとは。もちろん奥様とて内心はあの二人に辛く当たる言われは何もないことを重々承知してはおります。しかしそれが理屈で分かっているからといってどうにもならないのが人の心。ああ、ほいたわしや。私には何もできず、こうして物陰から見守ることしかできないのです。
Oh, okay. Whoa. That was abrupt. Alright, yay, back to happy times. The four of us cousins were shooting the breeze over all kinds of topics. After all, there are both guys and girls here. Plus, we've got people over a wide spread of ages. Adult, high school, and elementary school. All each of us had to do was talk about ourselves and would be of great interest to the other three.
なんかやっと馴染んできたぜ。ジェシカもマリアも6年前からは想像もつかないくらい成長しちまったからよ。正直なところ少しだけ違和感を持ってたんだが、こうして話をしているうちに中身はあの頃から何も変わってないことが分かったぜ。
同じ言葉を返してやるよ。バトラだって6年ぶりだってのに全然変わってねえぜ。図体がいくらでかくなっても中身は相変わらずお子様だってことだな。
マリアもお子様、マリアもお子様。
マリアだっていつまでもお子様じゃねえぞ。お子様から可愛いお姫様に成長してくんだからな。そうしたらまな板みてえな胸もすぐジェシカ並みになるぞ。
Jesus, she's like 9 years old, my dude. Like, it's one thing to sexualize your cousin who's of age, but ew. Ew. Stop it. Oh, no. Oh, God, he's like eerie, where it's like, he's usually cool, and then he goes, and then he does this, and I'm like, ew. I've lost a little bit of respect for you, but then you're gonna be cool again. Ew, no, Maria. No, Maria, no.
ダメだよマリアちゃん。そんな約束しちゃダメ。
Thank you, George. Person of reason here.
No.
Oh, Maria, I hope that, first of all, I hope you survive this, and whatever's going to be coming, and second of all, I hope that you are not this naive as a teenager, because it will be very bad for you.
マリア、お前本当に素直ないい子だな。
Yeah, so show her some respect, my dude.
お前と結婚する未来の旦那さんはきっと
っていい話にすり替えつつ約束を保持してんじゃねえぜ。マリア、その約束はなしなし。
約束取り消し。
やっぱりバトラ君も揃って4人で集まらないといとこが集合した気がしなかったね。この6年はやっぱり寂しかったよ。
そうだな。こういうふざけた話にはならなかったな。でも建設的な話はできてたと思ったぜ。将来に対する心構えとか受験とか就職とかよ。
悪うございましたね。俺が来たらおまぬけなドタバタばっかりでよ。
でもマリアは今年のが楽しい。
そうだね、僕も同感。今年が一番楽しいよ。
Yeah, not for long, I feel like. Maria's sincere words probably spoke for everyone. When George Aniki stroked Maria's head, she giggled like a happy kitten.
失礼いたします。お食事のご用意ができました。
A timid knocking sound and an equally timid young woman's voice came through the door. Jessica answered brightly.
シャノン、入れよ。バトラは覚えてるだろ？
Jessica stood up from the bed and opened the door. There stood a servant girl who was definitely about our age.
ご無沙汰いたしております。バトラ様、6年ぶりでございます。シャノンです。
Noting my presence and trembling a bit, she bowed deeply. Oh no, here we go.
ジェシカにも驚かされたが、シャノンちゃんにも驚かされたぜ。
Well, at least she's appropriate. She's not related to you, so it's okay. Ogle away.
あんたもすっかり美人になったじゃねえのよ。
もったいないお言葉。今日。
しかしよ、この島じゃよっぽど食事の栄養価が高いんじゃねえのか？何を食ってどこを鍛えたらそんなにでっかいお胸になるんだか。ジェシカとどっちがでけえか、ジョイント触って確かめさせてもらうぜ。
With both hands poised and saliva dribbling from my mouth, I closed in. For the sake of my honor and justice, I'd like to point out that I don't suffer from some strange disease that makes my lymph nodes itch until I scratch my neck open, and which can only be prevented by rubbing breasts. It's just my battler-style way of communicating. When a boy closes in on a girl like this, 9 times out of 10 they get slapped or clobbered, right? This is a battler-sama original communication technique, aiming for a gag like that to break the ice. Well, that means I really do get to touch them on the 1 in 10 chance though, right? Eehahaha. I'd never ask for that much though. By now my hands were less than a centimeter away from Shannon-chan's chest, but the counter-strike had yet to come. Poor girl, she's like, I'm a servant, I can't, like, say no, or, you know, fight back. Oh. She understood what was going on, and she was blushing, and had her head lowered in embarrassment. She was just standing there with both hands politely joined in front of her, not even trying to resist or cover her breasts. Whoa, I wasn't planning on this. Dude, you've been pretty perceptive so far about, like, you know, the difference between you coming from a rich family and normal people, so hopefully he'd realize he's got a little bit of an imbalance of power here. Please hit me right now. At this rate, I'm seriously going to touch them. That was probably Jessica, yep. Which is why I was glad Jessica chose that time to drive her elbow into the back of my head. I like that he's like, I can't help myself, I need someone to stop me. I won't stop me. But it's like, I don't want to do it.
なんで私が感謝されんだ？
いやいや、すまんぜシャノンちゃん。魅力的な胸に思わず吸着されそうになっちまった。つうか、さすがにあの間合いまで来たら犯罪確定だろ。ダメだぜ、抵抗しなきゃよ。
Ew, that's kind of gross. So like, oh, it's your fault that you almost got groped because you didn't resist.
ですけど、バトラ様は大切なお客様ですし。
あのな、お客様でも犯罪は犯罪。
I don't know how to feel about him. He's like, you know, he's like trying to teach her, you know, like you gotta fight back. Like, you know, you gotta defend yourself. Just because, you know, I have privilege doesn't mean that you shouldn't fight back. But also, I'm gonna try it anyway. Like, oh my dude.
女の子の胸はだいたい10センチくらいからが防空識別圏だな。2センチ圏まで侵入してきたら、これはもう領空侵犯だぜ。スクランブル発進で即ビンタを食らわせてやれ。
Or maybe he's just into getting hit by women. I don't know.
そんなことできません。私たちは家具ですし。
Of course, she didn't want her breasts touched, but if a guest so desired, she intended to sacrifice her own needs in an effort to accommodate them. A girl like this needs some urgent protection. Like, he's chivalrous and also, like, gross at the same time.
今時こんな献身美徳な子がいるとは。軽いめまいすら覚えるぜ。でもダメだ。ダメなんだ。俺がいやらしい顔で迫る。カットハウス。いや、エッチ。そういうお約束じゃないとオチがつかねえんだよ。頼むよ、お願いだよ。俺を引っ叩いてくれよ。
I think he's just into getting smacked by pretty girls. I think that's his thing.
こうバチンとバチンと。
お願いは聞けません。家具ですから。でも命令ならお聞きします。
それが務めですから。
Is no one gonna point out the fact that the servants call themselves furniture? Oh, it's so demeaning.
じゃあ命令させてもらうことにするよ。次からバトラ君が胸に触ろうとしてきたら平手打ちで反撃すること。いいね。
はい、仰せつかりました。以後そのようにさせていただきます。バトラ様、ご承知おきくださいませ。
So Shannon-chan declared while bowing elegant to me. Her facial expression was radiant. I gave her a thumbs up to signal, you got it.
6年前はお手伝いさんの連れ子がついでにお手伝いみたいな印象だったんだけど、すっかり一人前の使用人さんだな。今年で何年になるんだ？
はい、おかげさまで10年ほどお使いさせていただいております。
The kanji for her name is read as Shannon. That's another far from typical name from a Japanese person, or for a Japanese person. Being a kid back in those days, I had taken in her name without paying it much attention. But for her to be called something like that is pretty unusual given that she isn't a member of the Ushiromiya family. Maybe it's like a servant's professional name or something. If so, I can kind of understand why that Kanon-kun's name sounds the way it does too. She's a long-term servant who served here since she was 6. Since her body has changed radically, she didn't match my memories, but we used to know each other 6 years ago. It looked like she was just shy as she had been in the past, but I got the sense that she had become imbued with a charm befitting a girl her age. Especially her breast.
さっき会ったカノン君は彼女の弟なんだよ。
弟というわけでは。でも、私のことを姉と慕ってくれます。何か失礼なことはしませんでしたか？相変わらずいつも通りだぜ。もうちょっと愛想よくすればいいのによ。カノン君がご迷惑をおかけしたようで申し訳ございません。
別に迷惑なんか何も。同じ男としてわかるさ。ありゃ愛想が悪いのは当たり前だぜ。
I feel like those words aren't helping, Battler.
マリアもよく言われる。愛想悪いって言われる。カノンと一緒。
マリア様は愛想悪くなんかありません。
一緒がよかった。
食事の準備ができたんだっけ？
はい、失礼いたしました。お食事のご用意が整いましたので、皆様をお屋敷へご案内いたします。
Shannon bowed again formally and returned to her duty mode. We realized if we made her stick around for any more light conversation, it would actually make it harder for her to do her job, so we got off our butts to avoid interfering with her work any further.
じゃあお屋敷に行こうか。みんなもお腹が空いてたところでしょ。
だな。ゴーダさんがいる時の飯は楽しみなんだよ。あの人どこぞの有名ホテルでシェフをやってたらしくて、かなり料理の腕があるんだぜ。
ほうほう、それ楽しみ。行こうぜマリア。ガツガツ犬みたいに食い散らかすぞ。
犬みたいに食い散らかす。
ダメダメ。バトラ君の言うことはいちいち真に受けちゃダメだよ。全部冗談なんだから。さあ、行こうか。
Under Shannon-chan's guidance, we headed towards the mansion. Met once again by the magnificent rose garden, we continued onward as it came into view, the imposing mansion of the Ushiromiya main family. It had apparently been built shortly after the war, so you could feel the dignity of almost half a century hanging about it. On the surface, the building was gorgeous, but being as old as it was seemingly lacking in modern amenities like air conditioning. According to Jessica, midwinter was especially tough, what with all the drafts. Well, it's not like they couldn't just take the kotatsu out. As we entered the entrance hall, an aged servant greeted us. Now him I remembered. As the most senior member of the staff, Genji-san served as the head of the servants.
バトラ様、お久しゅうございます。
As our eyes met, he saluted us with a composed voice. He didn't give us quite a refined bow as Goda's, but it was a bow that had feeling, even if it wasn't polished to the same degree.
源氏さん、 本当にお久しぶりっす。お元気そうですね。
おかげさまで健やかに過ごさせていただいております。バトラ様こそご立派になられました。親方様の若き日に少し似てこられましたな。
俺がじい様にってことは、さぞやじい様は若い頃モテたろうな。
ここからはシャノンに代わって私がご案内申し上げます。どうぞこちらへ。
Shannon-chan bowed deeply and saw us off. Leaving the entrance hall, we headed to the dining hall under Genji-san's guidance. Genji-san, just like Kumasawa-san, stood in stark contrast to us young people who had grown beyond recognition over the last 6 years. His figure was exactly the same as in my memories of 6 years ago. It seemed as if time had stopped since we last met. Genji-san was a silent and diligent person. He was like grandfather's close aide or caregiver. In fact, you could even go so far as to say he was grandfather's right-hand man. Actually, it seems that he was by grandfather's side more than my late grandmother was. According to Jessica, grandfather trusts him more than any of his blood relatives. But I wonder how long he served. I've never asked for details, but I think I heard he's been here since the beginning, when this mansion was constructed. That's to say, he's dedicated half of his life to serving here. No wonder grandfather trusts him. As we cut through the open-ceiling hall behind Genji-san, I found something I had no memory of from 6 years ago. Now, I'm guessing that's Beatrice. It was an awfully big portrait hung right in front of the stairs that rose to the second floor. Without thinking, I stopped walking under its spell. Since I'd suddenly stopped, Maria, who was following behind me, ran into my back.
ああ、悪い。なあ、ジェシカ、あんな絵、前はあったっけ?
I pointed at the large and conspicuous portrait hanging in the hall. Everyone else stopped too.
ああ、そっか。バトラが来てた頃には、あれはかけられてなかったっけ？いつからだったかな。
確か、僕の記憶が正しければ、一昨年あたりだったと思うよ。
さようでございます。一昨年の4月に親方様がかねてより画家に命じて描かせていたものをあそこに展示なされたのでございます。
あのじい様がね、わざわざ描かせてか。
The portrait depicted a woman in an elegant dress who gave off the sense of refinement and who seemed to suit the Western style of this mansion. I couldn't have guessed her age, but the sharpness and obvious strength of will in her eyes gave me the impression of youth. It was a different feeling than the composed mood of middle-aged women that are often in famous pictures. This woman had normal black hair. I may have thought it was a portrait of my long-deceased grandmother in her prime. However, the woman in this portrait had beautiful golden hair and didn't look Japanese at all.
で、誰だい？このご婦人はよ。
As though trying to show off her knowledge, Maria answered that simple question with authority.
マリア知ってる。ベアトリーチェ。
ベア、なんだって？
ベアトリーチェ。
Beatrice. It's Italian, right? Beatrice.
魔女だよ。バトラ君は昔聞かされたことない？
Like I said, that one's gonna be tough for me to remember. Beatrice.
魔女？ってこの島の？
I think I already said this, but Rokkenjima is a small island that's only about 10 kilometers around. However, considering that only the Ushiromiya family lives here, that's quite large. So, only a harbor and the site around the mansion were set up to be lived in. Beyond that, the island remained as untouched as it was when it was still uninhibited. To understand just how dangerous a vast and empty forest with no lamplight, phones, or people passing through it all actually is, you need to shift your urban assumptions a little. You see, if by chance you fell down a hole in the depths of the forest and sprained your ankle, cry or scream, no one would come save you. If it then got dark, the forest, where there are no streetlights, would become enshrouded in complete darkness. Also, since there obviously aren't any guideposts here, it's easy to get lost and lose your sense of direction in the dark forest. Nowadays, most people see a forest as a peaceful place, but to the people of bygone eras, before the light of civilization drove out the night, forests were like oceans on land, geographically separating one culture from another. Just as fishermen who go out into the ocean occasionally had their lives put in danger despite their technical knowledge. Technical knowledge was also demanded of hunters who went out into the forest, and their lives were occasionally put in danger just the same. If a child were to go play in that dangerous forest, something terrible might happen. Some parent must have had that thought. Maybe my grandmother, or possibly the man himself, my grandfather, might have said it. Or maybe it was a story handed down on this island from long, long ago. There's a terrible witch in the forest, so you must not go in. Thus, Rokkenjima's ghost story was born. That is the legend of the Witch of Rokkenjima. So when we say witch on this island, we're referring to the master of the vast and savage forest. Which reminds me, when I was little and stayed at this mansion, during the eerie nights where the wind and rain struck the windows, stories like the witch of the forest is roaming around in search of a sacrifice would scare the heck out of me. Beatrice, huh? As I searched my memory, prompted by Aniki, I did vaguely remember being told that was her name when I was very small.
しかし、あの魔女伝説の魔女に、ベアトリーチェなんておしゃれな名前がついてたとは、とんと忘れてたぜ。じいさまめ。孫たちが信じないもんだから、わざわざ絵に描きやがったか？
じいさまの妄想の中の魔女だよ。この絵を掲げた頃から、現実と幻想の区別がつかなくなり始めた。私たちにとっては想像の中の魔女に過ぎないけど、じいさまにとっては、彼女はこの島にいる存在、いる。だから、それを理解することができない私たちにもわかるよう、あの絵を描かせたって言うんだけど、気持ち悪いったらありゃしないぜ。
お嬢様、親方様にとっては大切な肖像画です。親方様の前で、そのようにおっしゃられることがございませんよ。
わかってるぜ。頼まれても言わねえよ。
Jessica turned away after glaring a second at the portrait.
行こうよ。食堂にみんなを待たせてるよ。
お腹すいた。
Only a small portion of this island is controlled by the Ushiromiya family. If all the wild remainder was the witch Beatrice's domain, then one could say she was the being who actually ruled over Rokkenjima. That unsettling, ominous feeling I had felt on the boat trip when I learned that the shrine had been struck by lightning revived within me a bit. At that time, Kumasawa-san had tried to tell an ominous story about Rokkenjima and had been stopped by Jessica. I didn't know what she tried to tell us about this island, but there was one thing I did know. Rokkenjima's ruler was not the Ushiromiya family. It was the witch, Beatrice. Yes, because this was the witch's island.
バトラー！遅い！
When I looked around, everyone was already heading towards the dining hall. I hurriedly chased after them. We walked up to the huge double doors that led to the dining hall. Genji-san knocked.
お子様方をお連れいたしました。失礼いたします。
The door was open and we were invited inside. The dining hall, which screamed filthy rich, featured a super long table which was obviously designed with no other purpose than to make the guests conscious of their rank. And our parents were already seated at it in accordance with that ordering.
遅いぞガキども。早く席につけよ。
The old bastard pressed us to sit. Only the places where we would sit were empty at the long table, which only made us feel our tardiness all the more. The seat at the very head of the table, which you might call the seat of honor, was for the most highly ranked and reserved for grandfather. It was still empty. He was probably planning to come in last to make himself look important. Alright, when are we going to meet this other brother? The seating order as you faced the seat of honor went from left to right in rows of 2, with the ranking being lower the further you were from it. So on the left-hand side of the row closest to the seat of honor was the second-ranked seat, belonging to the eldest of the adult siblings, Uncle Kraus, who we have not yet met. It looked like he hadn't arrived yet either, so that seat was empty. And then opposite him on the right-hand side of the first row sat the eldest daughter of the family, Auntie Ava, ranked at number 3. The left-hand side of the second row was for number 4. There sat the old bastard Rudolph as the third of the siblings. Opposite him sat number 5, the youngest sibling, Aunt Rosa. Going like this, you might think the next ones to come would be their husbands and wives, but guess again, because the left-hand seat in the following third row, meaning rank number 6, was actually Jessica's seat. Opposite her was George Aniki. Then the seat next to Jessica was me, and opposite me was Maria. And next to me on the left-hand side of the fifth row, all the way down at number 10, finally came Aunt Natsui. Opposite her was Uncle Hideyoshi. And next to Aunt they had these names, Natsui, in the sixth and final row on the left-hand side was Kirie-san. The seat opposite to Kirie-san had been laid out like the others, but was empty. According to this ranking system, that spot was the seat where Auntie Rose's husband should be sitting. He hasn't come as far as I know, yet the table had been laid for his seat. These kinds of ranking orders usually permit the spouse in a corresponding status, but the Ushiromiya family had an original kind of ranking. Maybe it's a leftover of male chauvinism, under the notion that a mother's womb is only a temporary house for the child and she contributes no genes. Children of direct descent would have the highest ranking, followed by the grandkids, meaning that the spouses with no blood ties would be considered the last in line. It's terrible, but according to that ranking order, grandmother, if she were still alive, would be in a position even lower than mine. In youth, obey your father, after marriage your husband, and after aging, your children. A leftover of the times where they used to say women, no home in 3 worlds. Long ago when I was still incapable of figuring all this out, I thought it was so great we could all chat with the adult siblings sitting in their groups and us cousins in ours. However, now that I can re-examine the seating order after growing up a bit, it stirs up some very complicated feelings in me. Aunt Natsui, married to the eldest son of the family, responsible for managing the household and number 2 for all practical intents and purposes, sat to my right, which means that she was 2 steps lower than me in the ranking order. I can imagine that probably she might have some deep-seated, either some sort of complex or maybe some harboring some resentment for that. It was difficult to guess what was going through her head. Obviously, she's somewhat sickly and not a very pleasant-seeming person. That's why I made a small apologetic gesture before sitting down.
お久しぶりですね、バトラ君。ずいぶん背が伸びましたね。
She's even more curt than Rosa. At least Rosa is able to still, crack some jokes, and she seems to be a little bit more lighthearted. This woman is just cold.
はい。食ったり食べたり食事したりしてたら、いつの間にかこんな身長に。
さすが男の子ね。身長はいくつくらいあるの
？180かな。つーかおばさん、そこは食べてばっかりじゃねえかって突っ込んでくださいよ。
え？ああ。ごめんなさいね。
After a moment, she gave a small laugh, but it seemed she couldn't quite figure out what she was supposed to be laughing at. This woman is Aunt Natsui. I'm so sorry. I feel like I'm pronouncing her name wrong. I had written down the pronunciation somewhere on a piece of paper, but I don't know where it is. She's the wife of the eldest son of the family, meaning she's my dad's older brother's wife. It's easier to get it if I call her Jessica's mother. Or is it easier to get it if I call her Jessica's mother? It feels bad to say it like this, but not that I hate her, but I didn't particularly like her. She never got into our kids' circle, and my only impression of her was as someone who always talked about complicated stuff with my parents while having a crabby expression on her face. The fact is that barely having exchanged words, I hesitated a lot even just now about how to approach her. And it was pretty much a flop. The silverware had been tidily set up on the table, but the meal itself hadn't been brought in. As a rule, the meal doesn't start until the man at the head of the table has taken his seat. So as long as grandfather, the highest ranked, didn't come, lunch would be indefinitely on hold. Not even the appetizers would come. In other words, the silence in the dining hall was the sound of our parents as they withstood their hunger and waited, on tenterhooks, for grandfather to come. Except, the grandfather I remembered always showed up at the right time when we ate together like this. Oh, he did? Is he did? He wouldn't ever have been so late as to have everyone else waiting on him.
遅えな、じいさま。俺の記憶じゃ。 時間に厳格な人だったと思うんだけどな。
まあ6年前はそうだったかもな。最近はそうでもねえよ。というかもう自分の世界オンリーって感じで、会食さすがに今日くらいは足並みを揃えてくれるって思ってたんだけどな。まあ私は来ない方が気楽で嬉しいけどよ。
ジェシカ。
After being scolded by her mother, Jessica faced the other way, sticking her tongue out. No way around it. Nothing to do about it but wait for the host to arrive. While I glanced at the clock, I saw it was almost 20 minutes past 12. The aged master of the Ushiromiya head house, Ushiromiya Kinzo, he was there in the study. The clock showed noon, but he didn't even attempt to get up. With reading glasses on his face, he stacked up old-fashioned books with elaborately designed bindings one on top of another beside him, immersing himself in their reading. It definitely didn't look like it was for his leisure. On the contrary, he exuded impatience, crisis, as though every minute, every second was precious. The sealed room was dense with dancing dust particles, and the air stagnated with a mix of smells of various elixirs, each giving off its own suspicious stench. They were somehow sweet and heavy. For anyone with a good nose, the first thing they'd do after entering was to open a window and ventilate the room.
Otou-san! Otou-san!
The knocking against the study door had been going on for a while. A voice calling "Father" sometimes mingled with the knocks. As Kinzo heaved a deep sigh, he snapped shut the old book he had in his hands and slammed it onto the table. Then he yelled at Kraus, who was continuing to knock on the door.
Yakamoshi! その音を止めぬか、愚か者！叩けば扉は開かれると誰が教えた？そのバカ者は貼り付けにしたぞ。お前もそうされたいのか？
お父さん、年に一度の親族会議の日ではありませんか。皆下に集まっています。どうかおいでください。
Kraus called out to his father through the door. Kinzo always shut himself up in the study and hated letting even his family into the room. For that reason, Kraus had no choice but to call out thus from the corridor.
私にかがうでない。皆とは何か、私をここから引きずり出そうとする者どもなのか？ならば殺してしまい。
Okay.
バラバラにして薪にして魔女の炉にくべてしまい。その炉には鍋をかけて苦いおもぎを煮るがいい。黙示録の煮汁はそれでも私をここから連れ出そうとするバカ者どもに飲ませてやれ。残りは酒につけるのだ。ああ、源氏はどこだ？源氏を呼べ。苦界の魔師を用意させろ。緑の妖精のささやきが届かぬ。ああ、源氏はどこだ？源氏を呼べ。
Before the door, Kraus, Nanjo, and Genji kept waiting for the master of the house, who would not come out.
すっかり嫌われてしまったようだ。もう私の声では何も届かんよ。
Kraus shrugged as though saying it's no use, and smiled bitterly. He himself hadn't believed for a moment that his father would answer his calls. However, as it was the duty of the eldest son, he had formally made the request.
金蔵さん、あんたの顔を見に、息子や娘や孫たちが来てるんじゃないか。ちょっと顔を見せてやったらどうだね。
うるさい、黙れ。私に意見するというか何条。貴様など呼んではおらぬ。私は源氏を呼べと言ったのだ。さあ急げ、すぐに呼べ。時間は常に有限だ。人たちはすでにラッパを構えているぞ。なぜにそれがわからぬか、愚かな羊どもめ。
Kinzo slammed the old heavy book on the table over and over. The racket obviously indicated his highest displeasure. Kinzo put his spectacles down and flew up from his chair. He spread his arms wide as if to sing to a packed opera house, as if appealing to someone, and yelled.
なぜだ？なぜにいつも私には邪魔が入るのか？
全てを捨てよう。全てを捧げよう。その見返りに私は一つしか求めないというのに。ああ、ベアトリーチェ。お前の微笑みをもう一度見られるならば、私は世界中から美少を奪い取り、全てをお前に捧げよう。おお、イナゴの軍団長たちよ。世界中から美少を刈り取り収穫せ。ああ、全てが汚らわしい。全てが煩わしい。なぜこの貴重な一日に私は邪魔を受けねばならぬのか。
Okay. Alright, is he biting the dust now? What's going on? Damn, dude, it's not sounding good.
何を怒鳴ってるのかもさっぱりだな。もう頭がどうにかなっているのだろう。
クラウスさん、実のお父さんにそりゃあんまりじゃないかね。
親父はすでに死んでいる。ここにいるのは親父だったものの幻さ。いずれにせよ本人にここを出る意志がない以上どうにもならんね。
金蔵さん。
Choking coughs continued to pour from the study.
私は下に戻る。ゴーダの自慢のランチをこれ以上無駄に冷ましてしまうことはない。親類たちにとって当家での数少ない楽しみだろうからな。
Kraus spun on his heels. He looked at his wristwatch, mumbling and acting as though he'd wasted time doing something he knew would be in vain.
源氏さん、親父殿がお呼びだ。相手を頼む。
かしこまりました。
南條先生、食事に行きましょう。いつまでもここにいると、この甘い匂いで味覚までおかしくなってしまう。
Without waiting for Nancho, Kraus went downstairs. Genji urged Nancho to go and eat. Nancho looked first at Kraus's back as he disappeared down the stairs, then to the study door, and he let out a deep sigh.
すまんが、源氏さん、頼みます。
はい、お任せください。
お酒はなるべく与えないように。あれは常習性が強すぎる。
源氏はまだか。何者が源氏を阻んでいるというのか。源氏はどこだ。源氏を呼べ。
さあ、ここはお任せください。
すみませんな。
Nancho gave a small duck of his head and descended the stairs. Genji saw him off and knocked at the study door.
親方様、源氏でございます。
源氏か。何故私をこれほどに待たすのか。そこには誰もおるまいな。
はい、私だけでございます。
Kinzo returned to his seat in the study and pressed an old-fashioned switch on the table. After a small delay, the heavy sound of the door unlocking could be heard. Kinzo believed that his family might try to break into his study. Perhaps someone once opened the window for some air and scattered some important documents or something. And that had made him extremely upset. Now, Kinzo had placed a secure lock in his room, making it so without his permission, nobody could enter, and locking himself in the dungeon he had created. Genji, who he trusted the most, was relatively free to enter the room, but even that was not absolute. Ooh, are we gonna have a closed, what is that called? Like a closed room mystery here, where maybe he's gonna die or get killed, but there's nobody who could enter the room, unless Kenji let them in? Or Kinzo. Damn it, these names. If Kinzo was in a bad mood, even he wouldn't be able to enter. Anyone else would be limited to holding a conversation through the door, not even seeing his face. And most of the time, they wouldn't even get a real conversation. However, that didn't pose any particular problem for the family. That was because they had no reason to go out of their way to interfere with the retirement of the cantankerous and aged head. The fact he was completely immersed in his odd research and always locked up in his hideaway was something of a benefit. They made the most of his refusal to leave the study, entrusting him to the hands of the servants, while they themselves kept their distance.
源氏、 いつものやつを頼む。私は忙しい。
はい。
Genji headed to a corner of the study. There, suspicious-looking bottles boasting venomous colors were on display. They were actually liquor, but considering that they were placed in this shady-looking room, you could almost suspect they might be ghastly poisons. Once again, talk of poisons. That comes up a lot so far, hasn't it? The inside of the study was filled with a mountainous library of outlandish books that Kinzo had amassed. They were bizarre old books, some banned, and each and every one of them either forbidden, cursed, or sealed. Of course, if one were to actually call them old books, Kinzo would fly into a rage and say something like this. Call them grimoires. There were candles which had melted in a suspicious-looking fashion and taken on peculiar forms, and all manner of other strange objects, probably having something to do with black magic. The constellations covering the celestial globe would have caused anyone who knew the night sky well to raise an eyebrow. The illustrations inscribed in old books, haphazardly left open, ranged from the religious and mystical to the demonic and grotesque, as well as bizarre diagrams of various magic circles, and above all, the sweet poisonous smell that filled the room, which to those entering for the first time would surely be a profound assault on their sense of sight, smell, and all their other senses, making them lose grip on reality. Inside that study, Genji, with his well-trained hand, prepared Kinzo's usual drink. If you didn't know that ghastly dark green liquid that filled the completely designed bottle was liquid, you certainly wouldn't want to put it in your mouth. He poured a small quantity of the spirit into the glass, placed a cube of sugar in a strangely shaped spoon, and then poured water from a pitcher over it. Strangely, when the colorless water was poured into it, the dark green liquid turned a cloudy white. It created the strange visual illusion that the water had caused a chemical reaction, which made it all the more difficult to perceive the concoction as liquor. To this, he added an original flavoring that Kinzo liked and fine-tuned the taste. There was no recipe. Its success was measured only by Ginzo's mood swing when he drank it, and he had learned how to make it only after many decades. Genji placed the glass on a tray and made his way over to Kinzo. Kinzo was now gazing out the window.
どうぞ、親方様。
ああ、すまん。
Kinzo had regained his composure, so much that he was now unrecognizable as the man who had been shouting, screaming, and yelling just moments before. In that man's back dwelt a dignity and intelligence made plain simply by how he tilted his glass and gazed down at the scenery beyond the window. Genji, in order to allow Kinzo to set down his glass any time, motionlessly awaited behind and to the left, as though he were a living sideboard. As he did, Kinzo stuck out just the glass, his gaze still directed at the world outside the window. There was just a mouthful remaining. It was not a gesture intended to set it upon the tray, as Genji expected, but was a motion to hand the glass over to Kenji.
飲め、我が友よ。
もったいないお言葉です。
私とお前の中に儀礼はいらぬ。飲め、友よ。
いただきます。
Genji respectfully received the glass and inclined it a little to taste its contents. Then he downed it in one gulp.
お前が作るのを真似ているのだが、どうにも同じ味が出ぬ。お前が作る方がうまい。
ありがとうございます。親方様のご指導の賜物です。
Kinzo smiled at his loyal subject, who refused to put aside rank, even when asked to. However, he was not making fun of him. It was relaxed, like a smile at a close friend's unwritable bad habit.
互いに老いたな。年を数えることも忘れてすでに久しい。
今日まで過ごすことをお許しいただけたのも、すべて親方様のおかげでございます。
Kinzo gave a thin smile, as if to say he didn't need compliments.
今日まで本当によく私に仕えてくれた。息子たちは誰もが私を変人呼ばわりした。大勢いた使用人も皆私を恐れてやめていった。お前だけが今でも私に仕えてくれる。
もったいないお言葉です。
私の余命もそう長くはあるまい。息子たちは私の遺産がいつ転がり込んでくるかをうろうろ待つハゲタカばかりだ。
クラウスの愚か者は金を湯水のように使い、1枚の金貨を売るのに2枚の金貨を捨てておる。それで金を稼げたなどと妄言を。エヴァは金の亡者だ。あやつは私を鶏か何かだと思っておる。死んだらガラにして出汁まで取る気だ。ルドルフの間抜けは女遊びばかり。ローザはどこの馬の骨ともわからん男の赤ん坊など産みおって、ジェシカは無能で無学だ。ジョージには男としての器がない。バトラーは後ろ宮家の栄誉を自ら捨ておった愚か者だ。マリアなど見るのも汚らわしい。
Oh, damn. I like how I only reacted to Mario. She's obscene to the eye. Okay, that's a little harsh.
なぜだ、なぜに後ろ宮の血はこうも無能なのか。
Maybe saying she's obscene to the eye because, like you said, Rosa gave birth to the child of a nobody.
私の築き上げた栄光を受け継ぐにふさわしい者はおらんのか。ああ、分かっておるとも。これがベアトリーチェの呪いであることも分かっておる。黄金の魔女め、それが私への復讐のつもりか。憎みたくば憎むがよい。逃げたければ逃げるがよい。逃がさぬ、逃がさぬ、逃がさぬ、逃がさぬわ。お前は私のものだ。常に私の腕の中でなくてはならん。私の生涯のすべてなのだ。我が鳥かごにて永遠に私だけにささやき続けるのだ。ベアトリーチェ、なぜに微笑み返してはくれぬ。ベアトリーチェ。
I'm kind of waiting for this guy to die. He's annoying. After howling, Kinzo choked once again. Genji set the tray and the glass down and patted his master's back. Genji's facial expression did not change. It was always like this. After his almost deranged outburst of the past few minutes settled down, Kinzo regained his composure once more. The way his attitude changed was like seeing two different people, a wild Kinzo and a composed Kinzo living together inside one body.
ゆえに私は決心した。このままぼやききった余生を怠慢に過ごすことなどもはや耐えられはせん。この身に最後にとするコインがあるならば、それを悪魔たちのルーレットに託してみたい。魔法の力はいつもかけるリスクで決まる。日本古来の呪術である牛の国参りがそうであろう。7日間儀式を目撃されてはならないというリスクを支払うからこそ魔力が宿る。困難なリスクが生じれば生じるほどに魔力は強く生じるのだ。神話に登場する数々の奇跡は天文学的リスクに奇跡的な低確率を得て成就した驚愕すべき魔力の結晶なのだと言える。モーゼが海を割ったのは神の奇跡ではない。蹂躙の計りに乗せられ軍勢によって航海に追い詰められた絶体絶命のリスクが奇跡の魔力を生んだのだ。同じことが同じ規模で繰り返されようとも再び海が割れることはないだろう。なぜならモーゼは力ある者たちのルーレットの麻生木ナユタをかけたよりも多く存在する目の中に一つだけ刻まれた奇跡を見事引き寄せることができたからだ。
Okay, so I also have to check there's these tips, so these things that show up in green. So before I'm done this episode, I'll go through the ones that I've got so far.
その天文学的確率に勝利できる力。そう、奇跡をつかみ取る運気はすなわち魔力なのだ。
You know, why don't we do that right now, actually? Okay, so I looked at these ones before, so there's the honorifics about, you know, San, Sama, Kun, Chen. Then, like, Ni, Aniki, Aniki. I like the thing about Jessica's speech where it talks about how she speaks more in like a masculine tone. I kind of like that about her. Tori is a ceremonial entry gate to a Shinto shrine. Kotatsu, a table heater hybrid used as a way to keep warm in Japan during the cold months. Large Japanese numbers, very large ancient Japanese numbers, more likely to express numbers of this size using powers of 10, just like Western languages. That's a lot of math. Multiply together, Asogi and Nayuta give the number that is so large it doesn't have a Japanese name. Oh, and while we're there, since we're introduced to almost all the characters, let's talk about the characters that were just introduced in this episode. So we have Natsui, Kraus's wife, manages the household of the Ushiromiya head family in place of her husband, who takes little interest. For this family conference again, she was the one who took charge of making all the preparations and arrangements, possesses a strong sense of responsibility and a great deal of pride. However, neither her husband nor his siblings understand her very well, so her position is far from enviable. And we got Shannon, a young but experienced servant. She's normally calm and performs her job flawlessly, but she messes up when she gets nervous. Furthermore, Shannon is nothing more than a pseudonym that she uses when on duty, not her real name. Genji, a head servant leading all the other servants who work for the Ushiromiya family, has served Kinzo longer than any other and has earned his greatest trust. Since he serves Kinzo directly, Kraus and Natsui think of him as Kinzo's spy. Kanon, a young servant, performs his duties silently and diligently, but due to his unsociable nature, he is not so highly regarded as a servant. There are several other servants with the on character in their pseudonyms. He and Shannon just happen to be the ones on duty that day. Goda, servant employed as a chef. While he hasn't served the family long, he has polished talent for entertaining guests, cultivated through his previous jobs, and is highly regarded as a servant. Since he was hired by Kraus and his wife, he's more trusted than those servants who have served the family longer, and who are thought of as Kinzo's spies. Oh, I guess we don't have a thing for the brother yet. Huh, interesting.
強大な魔力を得るためには絶望的なリスクを背負わねばならぬ。魔力もたぬ者はそれを賭けでなく自暴自棄と呼ぼう。しかし真に魔力ある者はその奇跡をつかみ取り神秘を成就させるのだ。もしも私にその魔力があるならば、私はその奇跡をつかみ取るだろう。生涯を費やした願いを実現できるだろう。
Kinzo looked up to the sky outside the window. He spread his arms as if appealing to someone up in the skies.
もし私にその奇跡を手にする資格があったなら、おー、ベアトリーチェ、ベアトリーチェ。お前の愛くるしい笑顔をもう一度だけ見せてくれ。どれほどの月日を経ようともお前の面影が消えることはない。ただお前の美少が見たい、それだけだ。お前から授かったものを全て返そう。あの日からの栄光を全てお前に返そう。富も名誉も黄金もいらぬ。お前に授かった全てを返そう。 私はただお前の美少が見たいだけなのだ。五少だ、ベアトリーチェ。
His nonsensical yell segued into a scream, and then into a wail. Kinzo crumpled to the floor and clawed at it with both hands. Genji had no choice but to wordlessly watch over his master's lament. Alright guys, that will do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed. Decided to do a little bit of a longer one this time. So definitely seeing more of those interesting family dynamics, and also the dynamics between the servants and the head family and the servants with each other. So interesting. A lot of mention of poison too in this episode. I wonder if that is going to be a foreshadowing, but we'll just have to wait and see. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye. Special shoutouts to my top tier patrons: Nana, Sparky, iCognito, Matt Goldsmith, Harry Gazif, and Asborn Kennedy.